wasn't talked about much then, but in later years, they talked about how I was the first African-American designer General Motors ever hired. I didn't really think about it at the time. I was on such a mission to design cars. I was so focused on that, and not the fact that I was the first African-American, and I seemed to be really welcomed by everyone there. And I think people were very helpful because I did not come from Art Center, the place where all the beautiful designs were coming from, or designers were coming from. So they were very helpful. And it wasn't until years later that it really started to sink in. It wasn't that long, but it is 2 or 3 years before it started to sink in, the fact that I was really the first African-American that they had hired.
What do you think about now, looking back at that?
Well, first off, I always think about the second guy because they always made a comparison between the two of us. And they really liked me. Chuck really liked me, the leadership team liked me. And the second guy, they were disappointed because his personality was different than mine. Mm-hmm. And they told him, and that wasn't really cool, and he grew not to really like me, and he didn't stay that much longer than that. When I look back on it, it was, I think it wasn't until as I was becoming far more established and moving up the ladder that I really saw some challenges. There were those who thought that GM would never appoint someone as an African-American, would never appoint an African-American as an executive, let alone vice president, but even as a studio chief. And, I was actually cautioned about that,
That there was a ceiling.
Yeah. And that, I needed to understand that and be comfortable at the level that I'm at, or seek employment elsewhere.
Wow.
And not by one of my colleagues, but by one of my supervisors. And, so it was like, that kind of rocked me. But yet again, something that was a challenge or was very difficult, I kind of turned it into an opportunity. Well, okay, I'm going to push even harder. And within a year of that, I was named chief designer of Olds 2.
Fabulous. Now, mentors at GM, who could you confide in? Who was really supportive of you? You've mentioned Chuck liked you. Who else comes to mind?
Yeah, but I always noticed with Chuck, if you got too close to the flame, you might get burned.
Oh, the cobra could strike.
Yeah, the cobra can strike. So I knew, that relationship was kept at a bit of a distance. And, I had a couple very good conversations with Irv Verbicki over the years. And so I think when I entered there, Ron Hill was someone who was very supportive. And then, a few years later, it may have been Irv Verbicki. And then I think Wayne Cherry was the person who was, I always think of him as being the most supportive person. I think that the whole mentor thing, people look to someone who, that person, they look to someone who reminds them of themselves. If there's a manager or a leader, if they see a young person that reminds them of themselves or the way they wish they would have been, then they're likely to be a mentor to that person. And obviously, they didn't see me as looking like them. And so I'd say I really didn't have a mentor. I don't believe that I had a mentor until Wayne Cherry was the first person who really took me under his wing.